This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Alright, what's going on, you guys, man? Welcome back to yet another King Japes video. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I personally get better color when it comes to shooting any 35mm film. And I'm not going to really be talking about like editing your film in post. There's a little taboo to that within the film photography community. And so today's video is going to focus more on, some of the things that you can do to enhance some of the film's characteristics. We're going to dive into some of my favorite films that get me really nice color, as well as, just some tips that you guys can utilize out in the field when you're out making your photographs. You may have seen other film photographers post up like on Instagram their photographs that just seem a lot more vibrant, a lot more alive. And today I'm going to show you guys exactly how to achieve that effect with pretty much any 35mm film. So with that said, let's jump into today's episode. Alright, here is the remnants of my latte art. Alright, so when it comes to getting good colors on film and getting that nice, vibrant, punchy look that, a lot of film photography is known for, it all really comes down to a bunch of different variables and how consistent you are with each of them. There's not like a one magical tip that is going to give you good color every single time. Just think of it more as a checklist of things that you can go through to ensure that your film at the end of the day is going to look good. And that very first variable, you guys, is the type of film that you are using. Obviously, if you want to get good color on a film, you want to get a film that is going to suit your taste in color. And luckily with different film stocks, it's going to give you different looks. For example, a lot of what I used to shoot was on Fuji Superia 400. And during that period of time, Fuji Superia was a great film for me because it was affordable, but it also often gave me these nice kind of earthy green tones, as well as kind of like this cooler looking vibe that, really worked a lot in some of my earlier street photography. Fuji Superia is a great film stock, but that was kind of its characteristic. But then later on, I switched over to shooting primarily LOMO 800. And LOMO 800 had a whole set of different characteristics. You can shoot it in kind of cooler temperatures and it'll still kind of create this cinematic like cyan colors. And then you would shoot it in like sunlight and then you would get these nice kind of neutral warm tones. And so when it comes to getting better film colors, I should say, it really comes down to selecting the film stock that you feel is going to be best for the shoot, your own personal taste, and just what you want your images to look like. And so the first thing that I would do is I would go back into the archives, look at all of the different film rolls that you've shot, and figure out what color film you like the most in terms of color rendition, and then kind of pick out some of the characteristics so that you have a better understanding of the film stock. That way you can kind of cater each film stock to different occasions. Maybe you shoot Fuji Superia in the cooler months, and maybe you shoot something like Kodak Gold in some of the warmer months because it accentuates more of that warmer tone. Knowing your film stocks, knowing the characteristics, and applying it to where it will do the best is going to be a huge game changer, especially if you are just getting into film photography. Now, the second variable that we're going to be talking about is just piggybacking off of that first one, and that is shooting in the right weather. Now, of course, this is very dependent on the film stock that you are using. So if you're using a film stock that is going to do great in warmer weather, shoot during the sunny, times of the day, or maybe go shoot during golden hour. Golden hour is going to give you so much more color than just shooting at like a regular midday scene. When you're shooting with the sun right above your head, oftentimes you'll find that the light looks very sharp and harsh, and you're gonna get a lot of these, crazy shadows on people's faces if you're shooting portraits. But during golden hour, because also blue hour, I should say, during golden hour and those, kind of in between transitional times, you're getting the last hour of sunlight where the sun is the most orange. It's going to be the most bright casted on someone's face as well as on any landscape. And so during those times, the scenes just look more dramatic. And if you can kind of pick and choose at the right time and the right weather to shoot in, you can definitely get more colors and characteristics pulled out of each of the film stocks that you shoot. Now, before we move on, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Now, you guys, as any type of creative, whether you are a photographer, videographer, photojournalist, I guess that is photographer. If you fall under any one of those categories, it is essential that moving forward in 2022, you have your own dedicated website. And if you're like me and you don't really know how to build a website, you are in luck, man. Squarespace makes it super easy with award-winning templates that always regularly get updated, so there's fresh ones on there all the time. You also have the option to have an e-commerce shop for print sales, merchandise, whatever you want. And my favorite feature, folks, is the dedicated portfolio pages, a place where you can send your clients rather than sending them over to your Instagram. So if you guys haven't already, man, head over to squarespace.com/kingjapes or enter promo code @kingjapes at checkout, and you guys can receive 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace, man, for sponsoring this episode. Variable number 3, in my opinion, is one of the more important variables, and that's simply just to expose your film properly. There's a lot that goes on with color. If you underexpose your film, there's so much that goes on. For example, certain film stocks like Fuji Superia 400 and 800, when you underexpose, certain areas, especially in like the shadow areas, one, you're gonna get increased grain, and two, you're gonna start to see these weird color shifts in the overall look of the film. The underexposed areas tend to lean more towards of a magenta cast, sometimes depending on the photograph, a green cast, and it's very apparent in that film stock. And also another one with like Kodak PORTRA, something that I noticed too when underexposed, it's a more neutral film than Fuji Superia, I will say that, but you still start to see some of those weird kind of shifts in color. You may kind of get some wonky colors that you might not want in your photographs. And so an easy way to combat any of those issues is just to expose your film properly. Use the in-camera light meter. Nobody is too good for a light meter. Expose your film properly so that you can get nice and accurate colors. And variable number 4, you guys, is shooting fresh film. There's a lot of people out there who will go out and buy expired film because they know they can get away with it and they know they can shoot with it. And this is something that I do as well on a consistent basis, because as long as you compensate for the time that it's been expired in stops of light by overexposing, you can pretty much get away with it. But another thing that you want to reconsider is that if you want to get perfect color every single time, you want to get very accurate colors, you need to shoot fresh film. It's just the best way to get the film's characteristics as it is, because when you shoot expired films, a lot of times what you'll notice is that when underexposed or maybe even sometimes overexposed, there are just going to be slight shifts in color that aren't really there when it's fresh. And so even if you can get away with shooting expired film, if you are purely looking to get solid colors every single time, consistent colors that is, make sure to shoot your film fresh. Now, I mentioned in, I think it was variable number 3 or 4, that you need to expose your film properly to get good colors. That's just, a fact. But something that a lot of people experiment with is overexposing the film. A couple of years ago, I learned that, from other film photographers, if you overexpose your film by even just a stop, certain film stocks will give you different kind of pastel looking colors. And I noticed this works great with PORTRA. It worked great with ULTRAMAX. It worked great with LOMO 800. These were all films that, FUJI Superior I should say as well. These were all films that responded positively to overexposing by just one stop. And an easy way to do that, folks, is if you grab your camera, and let's say you're shooting PORTRA 400. The easiest way, in my opinion, to do this and just to kind of test and try out is when you're in your camera's setting for your ISO, rather than putting it at 400 ISO, which is its native kind of, film ISO, you want to overexpose that by one stop to 200. So rather than shooting PORTRA 400 at 400 ISO, you are now shooting it at 200 ISO. And in theory, you are overexposing the entire roll because your camera's light meter will be overexposing it by one stop every single time. And that's kind of just an easy blanket technique that you can use. Obviously, if you want to shoot it at 400 ISO, its native film ISO, you can. And then just adjust one stop by either opening up your aperture one extra stop or, slowing down your shutter speed by one extra stop. There's a ton of different ways you can do this, but I found that if you just want to experiment with the entire roll, with it being one stop overexposed, just setting it the ISO one stop over has been the easiest for me. You will find that so many different film stocks respond to exposure very differently. And the last variable that I want to talk about today has to do with very, very minor post-processing of colors. And when I say minor, I'm not talking about adjusting your saturation. I'm merely talking about adjusting your white balance. I know I mentioned in the beginning of this episode that editing your film photographs were kind of like taboo thing in the film community. And I think for the most part, if you're not completely reconstructing the color science of your photograph, I think it's fine, maybe adding a little bit of warmth to it or a little bit of a cooler tone to it. I think that's okay. I do it all the time. Maybe you're slightly adjusting the magenta tint in the photograph to get rid of a green cast or, vice versa. That's perfectly fine in my opinion, especially if you just want your photograph to look good. Because color casts on film are a real thing. If you've ever made a film photograph where the entire photograph for some reason has an underlying green tone, FUJI Superior shooters, I know you know what I'm talking about. But those things can easily be fixed by adjusting your tint. And it goes for a lot of people who do like home developing and home scanning. If you guys have only sent your film to a lab, every time you receive your photographs, they already have been slightly adjusted for. They have been edited. And I'm not saying, they went in and again, they changed all of the colors. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you develop your film, which I used to do all the time, you need to scan your film. And when you scan that film, a lot of times there's going to automatically be, certain adjustments that you need to make to get the film to look presentable. And a lot of times it really just dials down to, the tint. So yes, all of your film photographs are edited. Bingo. Now, I know everything that we just talked about seemed really kind of minor, but I promise you, the more you can kind of keep these in mind and the more consistent you are and just being mindful of these things while you're out shooting, the better colors you are going to get. Again, there's not like a magic trick that's going to instantly get you these really punchy tones. It's all about consistency. These are all things that I think of before I leave the house and select the type of film I'm shooting. And another one that I didn't really think was a huge variable in kind of the main ones that I had here is a film ISO. Film ISO plays a huge role because of the limitations of what you're going to be photographing. And always remember, there are different film stocks that cater to different looks. Cinestill 800T looks great under neon lights, kind of that tungsten look. Very, very cinematic looking. PORTRA looks great kind of during that golden hour, outdoorsy type of thing. Very summery vibes. That's what I get from PORTRA. And like I said, select all of the film stocks that you like, kind of understand their characteristics and know which one to use for each situation. And I promise you guys, do all of these things consistently and you will get much better colors in your film photographs. But that's gonna wrap it up, man, for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know in the comment section down below if you guys have any other kind of like tips, variables that you would want your other film photographers to know. With that said, I'm working on the review for the Konica Big Mini, and so if you guys are ready for that, definitely stay tuned for next week's video. But that's gonna wrap it up for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. As always, Minolta Gang.